Today we got the news that the United States and Ukraine have agreed a version of the critical minerals deal that the Trump administration had been pushing hard. The final terms of the deal are not yet public at the time of shooting this, so it's not yet clear just how much Ukraine was able to negotiate in concessions from the initial highly one-sided proposition, and how much they've just decided that they don't have much choice but to go with whatever it is. Trump insisted he wanted payback to the US for all the support that it had given to Ukraine in the past, turning the support from one of the champion of the free world resisting aggression to something more of a mercenary arrangement. Ukraine's President Zelensky had rejected earlier drafts of a deal because it had no security guarantees and indeed no apparent benefits whatsoever from the US side in return for the extraction of wealth from the Ukraine of around $500 billion. He said, "I am not signing something that 10 generations of Ukrainians will have to repay." He then rather undercut the implied strength of that position by adding, "If we are forced and we cannot do without it, then we should probably go for it." The pressure being applied to sign up is not in doubt. What we don't know is whether the US is condescending to offer anything in return in this latest draft, except for a rather vague assertion that somehow the mere fact of the deal would be security guarantee enough. As Mike Waltz, the US National Security Advisor, said, "What better could you have for Ukraine than to be in an economic partnership with the United States?" Now that does sound like a question that could have a number of good answers, but all of that is moot because it seems that a deal has been done. In due course we will find out the detail of the basis for it. Early reporting has suggested that the extraordinary demand for $500 billion to be paid into the fund is no longer part of the deal, and also that a previous clause requiring Ukraine to pay back double the value of any future American aid, that has likewise gone. The removal of those, assuming that information is accurate, are likely the main reason why the Ukrainians have become more comfortable with the deal. The question then is about whether or not it has a real security guarantee. Just before shooting this video, the Ukrainian Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal said that there would be an explicit link to long-term guarantees. What makes this the big question is whether it is real and substantial enough to actually constrain the range of possibilities open for a concluding peace deal between Russia and the US over the Ukraine war, something Trump has given every indication of being extremely reluctant to do. Interestingly, I predicted a few days ago that Russia could easily simply match Ukraine's offer of a deal on critical minerals, and indeed the very next day, the Kremlin did exactly that, saying that a deal from Russia and those parts of Ukraine under its control would be available for such a deal to the US. Now, it was partly trolling, I suspect, but the serious point is to demonstrate the lie behind the idea that the mere fact of a commercial arrangement between Ukraine and the US is a constraint on future action by Russia to meet its maximalist territorial goals. In line with that perspective, it's worth noting that right now it's been said there are no phone calls or meetings scheduled between Trump and Putin. Trump won't want such a discussion unless he has a sense that the skeleton of a deal is taking shape. And here's the truth: nothing in an exploitative deal on minerals makes that any more or any less likely, except that it gives Trump cover to continue giving support to Ukraine in the future, which means that Putin can't take it as read that America's new approach necessarily means that Ukraine collapses in the short term. But then I've been saying all along on this, what Trump wants from Putin is much more likely to be about benefits for the United States from a new relationship with Russia than it has anything to do with wins for Ukraine. So what has to happen before a summit takes place is out of sight and unpredictable right now. The Ukrainians are playing this stoically and pragmatically. All of this on critical minerals has the feel of a protectionist racket, not a normal relationship between allies. But they're looking at the hand they've been dealt, and they recognise that if they have to flatter the ego of Donald Trump and swallow a relatively one-sided deal that's nevertheless the best they can get under the circumstances, then that's what they will do, because that's what will serve Ukraine's interest the best, given their situation. Can they actually trust Trump's America to deliver on the obligations it does commit in this deal, assuming there are any? Based on the record of Trump's private businesses, famous for stiffing suppliers on a routine basis, well, I wouldn't if it were me. But again, pragmatism. If the alternative is that the US will become actively hostile to you, go out of its way to encourage the worst terms for a conclusion with Russia, you might feel that being stiffed in that way and publicly humiliated still your least worst option. This is a feature of the brave new world order that we have entered. The United States' message to allies and friendly nations is, pay us. The United States' message to its enemies is, let's make a deal. Some are already starting to sense opportunities in the idea of an amoral superpower with services for hire. President Tshisekedi of the Democratic Republic of Congo has offered the US a mineral deal of his own, granting access to critical minerals in exchange for US support against the Rwanda-backed M23 rebel group. China must be weighing this up, wondering how much would be demanded by Trump from Taiwan for America's protection and whether they would be inclined or able to pay it on the same sort of pragmatism basis. What we do know is that the US and Russia are pushing ahead with talks between their officials on restoring diplomatic relations between them, not waiting for anything to do with Ukraine. And Russia is now attacking Europe's positions on Ukraine to seek to draw a contrast between what it describes as the much more reasonable approach of Trump with those terrible old-style leaders who are travelling to Kiev and promising more aid to Ukraine and all sorts of dreadful things like that. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov contradicted Donald Trump, saying that Russia still holds the idea of European peacekeeping forces in Ukraine to be unacceptable. You'll remember that Trump had told journalists that Putin had no problem with the idea. But then Trump also said that Europe was only giving loans to Ukraine and would be getting all of its money back. And he said this in front of French President Macron. When Macron corrected the president, a moment that the mainstream media picked out and celebrated as Trump being live fact-checked, Trump simply said, if you believe that, that's fine with me, and then repeated the falsehood. So Trump's belief in his alternative reality version of what people have or have not done, what they did or did not say, seems robust enough to survive exposure to the people about whom he believes it, directly contradicting him and setting him straight. So whatever Putin really did say to him, doesn't seem as though it will have been as important as what Trump believes he said, regardless of what the Kremlin now says today. The Macron visit on Monday and the forthcoming visit by Keir Starmer tomorrow will be both examples of the European leaders flattering Trump and hoping that will be enough to ease his mindset back into the old world order way of seeing America's role in the world. Yeah, good luck with that. Macron flattered him enough that their press conference was mostly able to maintain the illusion of solidarity with just that one little bump in the road that I just mentioned. Keir Starmer is less smooth than Macron, but has at least impressed the Trump team by announcing an increase in defence spending at the expense of the aid budget. But ultimately, the discussions will be of limited traction, because fundamentally what they're trying to do is based on old realities that no longer apply. Some European leaders are further ahead and willing to say this, even if only in order to criticise it. So Donald Tusk, the Prime Minister of Poland, tweeted today, "Uncertainty, unpredictability, deals. Are these really the rules that the new international order should be based on?" Should? No, but it is what it is. Zelensky will be along on Friday, visiting Washington, D.C. to sign the minerals deal with Trump. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if Trump didn't go out of his way to humiliate Zelensky in that process, although when he is inevitably challenged by the press to repeat whether he thinks Zelensky is a dictator, which they will do, I expect he will row that back with a laugh. Zelensky was a dictator and a bad person because he was refusing to sign Trump's deal. Now, well, he'll be a smart guy because he's signing Trump's deal. I just do think that while he's saying that, he'll find some way to slip some humiliation in there as well, and Zelensky will take it stoically because he is the better man in that situation. The fact is that this deal, this shabby, forced deal that Trump has pushed onto a country in a state of distress that used to be an ally, the very fact that that has happened has now made a major change to the world, whether we like it or not. Various others, as I said, are taking note. The whole way that we deal with the most powerful country in the world and the most powerful man leading that country is going to reflect this for the next 4 years at least, and probably further thereafter.